The day 7 of June, of 1992, Sherill Levitt, of 47 years old, her daughter Suzanne Streeter, of 19, and Suzanne's friend Stacy McC, of 18 years old, disappeared from the home where Sherill Levitt and her daughter Suzanne lived in Springfield, Greene County, Missouri. Since then nothing has been heard from them. The case has been denominated as the Springfield 3.
Crimes and mysteries.
Brief overview of their lives. Born and raised in Bellevue, Washington, Sherill Levitt had a childhood of the most normal. Together with her father and sister Deborah, 8 years younger than her, they spent their time going for walks by the sea, enjoying camping and outdoor adventures. The time passed, and when Sherill was 19 years old, in the year 1964, she married her first husband, Brent Streeter. The following year, the couple had their first son, Bert, and in the year 1973, Sherill gave birth to her daughter Suzanne. Shortly after Suzanne was born, Sherill and Brent ended up getting divorced. In the year 1980, Sherill remarried. This time, with Don Levitt, who would become her second husband. That same year that they got married, Sherill and Don Levitt would move to Springfield, Missouri, following in the footsteps of their sister Deborah. 6 years later, in 1986, Sherill and Don would end up divorcing. After the divorce, Sherill had to struggle a lot, since had lost the house they initially moved into. But luckily, after a short time, Sherill was able to get a house of her own in a great area. Her son Bert was already grown and had already moved out, so the house was a new beginning for Sherill and Susie. The day before and after the disappearance. One day before they disappeared, on June 6, of 1992, friends Suzanne Streeter and Stacy McC graduated from Kickapoo High School in Springfield, and were celebrating their cherished achievement by attending graduation parties. That night, after the parties, the two teenagers drove separately to Suzanne Streeter's home, intending to spend the night there. They were last seen around 2:15 a.m. on June 7, according to data provided by the Springfield Police Department. At the time, it was also reported that, based on the items the two teenagers had in the house, it was clear that friends Suzanne and Stacy had already gotten ready to go to sleep at the time they were kidnapped. Her jewelry was in the bathroom, along with some damp cloths that the two friends are believed to have used to remove their makeup after a night of celebrating. Stacy McCall's shorts were also folded up and over her shoes, police told media outlets. Suzanne's mother was last heard from, Sherill Levitt. It was around 11:15 p.m. on June 6. According to the police department, when authorities arrived at the residence the next day, it appeared that someone had slept in his bed, and that all of his personal belongings had been left behind. Authorities believe the women were abducted sometime between 2:15 a.m. and 7:30 a.m. on June 7, at the house located at 1717 East Delmer Street in Springfield, Missouri. There were no signs of a struggle or any type of violent situation, except for a broken light bulb on the porch. When police authorities arrived on June 7, the family dog was in the house along with keys, money, jewelry, personal items, and the women's 3 vehicles that were still parked in the garage of the house. In later statements, retired Springfield Police Captain Tony Glenn would say, "The only thing unusual about this house was that the 3 women were missing. Looking inside the house, one had the feeling that something was missing there, or that something had to be missing. But it wasn't like that, they were just missing." Police investigation. Initially, the police investigation focused on complaints from neighbors about seeing a green van lurking in the area. But as the days went by, they put the spotlight on Robert Craig Cox, who was initially convicted of killing a woman in Florida. However, that conviction was overturned due to lack of evidence. And at the time that Sherill Levitt, Suzanne Streeter and Stacy McC disappeared, he was reportedly living in Springfield, Missouri. According to the newspaper local, Ozark's First, Robert Cox quickly became the main suspect in the case of the three missing women. According to the organism, Military Justice for All, Robert Craig Cox pleaded guilty to kidnapping and assault in the state of California. Sentenced to 9 years in prison, and while still serving his sentence, he was also found guilty and sentenced to death for the murder of a woman named Sharon Zellers in the city of Orlando, Florida. However, that conviction was overturned due to lack of evidence. According to deathpenaltyinfo.org, after that overturning, and having served his 9 years in prison, Cox would have moved to the city of Springfield. Sources such as the local newspaper, Ozark's First, they stated that former prosecutor Daryl Moore would have said that Robert Craig Cox aroused much interest for investigators, since, in the weeks following the disappearance of the three women, Cox's girlfriend provided an alibi to Robert Cox, telling police and investigators of the case that she and Cox were together when the three women disappeared. However, in subsequent interrogations, she would finally end up confessing to the police that her main statement had been a lie. In 1996, investigative journalist Dennis Graves of KY3 Television went to a Texas prison to interview Cox about the missing women. Robert Craig Cox would have told Dennis Graves,
"I know they're dead. I'll say it, and I know it."
When Graves tried to press him further, Robert Cox refused to provide more details. According to the television outlet, Cox is currently serving a life sentence in Texas for robbery, and will be eligible for parole in 2025. Despite strong suspicions, he was never formally charged in connection with the disappearance of the three Springfield women. Also learned, Bert Streeter, older brother of Suzanne Streeter, and son Sherill and Don Levitt. At first, he was considered a suspect by the authorities and investigators of the case of being involved in the disappearances. But he was finally acquitted. Further investigations. In 2002, investigators went to a concrete company in Webster County. After two women told police that they're in that place, there were men driving a green van, which would seem to be one of those sought by the authorities in the Unsolved case. Cadaver sniffer dogs were brought in to investigate three specific locations, one of which bone remains were recovered. But after conducting the relevant tests, it turned out that they were too ancient to belong to the three women. In April of 2003, investigators received tips that led them to some farmland south of Cassville. Using backhoes, they dug huge holes, but only managed to find two possible pieces of evidence: a sample of what could be blood, and the part of a green vehicle, perhaps like that of a green van, that witnesses say they saw in 1992. The investigators sent the blood evidence to a specialized laboratory, but after extensive testing, the results were inconclusive. In 2007, following speculation that the women were buried under a car park at Cox South Hospital, a local writer hired a consulting engineer who used ground-penetrating radar to scan the car park. The man operating it said that his machine had detected three different objects. Springfield police investigated the theory, but concluded it was not credible at all. So, the police never requested that the concrete in the parking lot be destroyed, or that an inspection be done under it. In February 2019, Bert Streeter, son of Sherill Levitt, and brother of Suzanne Streeter, was arrested on suspicion of public intoxication, disorderly conduct, and attempted false imprisonment for an unrelated incident in Tennessee. Very few new leads have emerged in recent years, but the search for information continues. The mother of Stacy McCall still is looking for her. In a conversation with People magazine, Janice McCall said that,
"I will never give up in the search for my daughter, and it doesn't exist a word called closure in the dictionary for families who miss someone.
I also declare,
My baby is gone. We want justice."
Janice said that the night before Stacy disappeared, she had spoken to her daughter on the phone. They both told each other that they loved each other, and then she never heard from her daughter again. The day after graduation, friends and family of the missing women tried to contact Stacy, Suzanne or Sherill Levitt, but with no answers from them. Janice McCall drove to the house where her daughter was supposed to spend the night. When she arrived, the front door was open, but the women were nowhere to be found. Janice contacted authorities immediately, and began distributing photographs of the 3 missing women. Also contacted the media, hoping to locate the women's whereabouts, but the case stalled. At the Coalition of Surviving Parents, Janice McCall wrote about her daughter and her dedication to finding her. And although Suzanne and Sherill's relatives have already declared them legally dead, Janice said she can't bear the thought of doing so. She also wrote,
"If there is even a chance, she is still alive. I choose to say she is missing and hope she returns one day."
Janice is also the co-founder and executive director of One Missing Link Incorporated, a non-profit that advocates for families of missing persons. She is also a member of the Association of Missing and Exploited Children's Organizations. Concluding with the case, the Springfield Police Department has set a reward of $43,000 for the location and prosecution of the persons responsible for the kidnapping of the 3 women. He also provided a description that the 3 women had at the time of her disappearance. Sherill Levitt was 1 meter 50 centimeters tall and 50 kilograms of weight, with brown eyes and short, platinum blonde, curly hair. Suzanne Streeter weighed 102 pounds, had brown eyes, straight, shoulder-length hair, dyed blonde. She had a scar on the top of her right forearm and a small tumor in the left corner of her mouth. On the other hand, Stacy McCall weighed 120 pounds, had blue eyes, was dark blonde, had medium-length hair with freckles, and a dimple in the middle of her chin. The disappearance of the 3 women, dubbed the Springfield Three, have baffled investigators for more than 3 decades. But authorities continue to ask the public for any information that could help solve the mystery that has rocked the town of Springfield, Missouri. More recently, and Roderick Jones, a New York journalist and Springfield native, launched a podcast about the disappearance of the 3 women. The podcast, titled The Springfield Three: A Disappearance in a Small Town, debuted on May 25th of 2021, and will feature 8 episodes plus 3 bonus. On June 26th of 2023, former Springfield Business Journal journalist Brian Brown and his father Alan Brown published a book inspired by the Unsolved case, titled Gone in the Night: The Story of the Springfield Three. The book explores the details of the case through fiction. Personally, I think that Robert Craig Cox had nothing to do with the disappearance of the 3 women. His profile doesn't fit. He was a rather clumsy person, and that's why he was arrested so many times. On the other hand, the person who took the 3 women knew very well what he was doing. He had already prepared the place where he would keep them kidnapped, and what the final destination of the women would be. Thank you all for making it to the end of the video. If you want, you can leave a comment and a like, so that the video reaches many more people. I send you all a big hug, and I hope you have a great day.